Hey everyone, welcome to the webinar today. Thank you to everyone who's here bang on time for the live session. I'm sure we'll have a few more people join us over the next couple of minutes. And while they continue to join, I'll quickly introduce our guest expert for today. So it's great to be joined by Silvio Perez, founder of AdConversion. How are you today, Silvio?
I'm doing well. I'm super excited to be here. Hello, everybody. Video ads is a topic that I don't think there's a lot of content around, that's like relevant. So this is something like near and dear to my heart, and really excited to like dive further into this.
Yeah, I know that there's a lot of useful stuff that you've been sharing on LinkedIn, and I knew this would you'd be like the perfect person to speak to about this particular topic. But just you're based in Lisbon, right? And selfishly, I'm interested in what the weather's like in Lisbon because I'm going there for the first time on Friday to check it out. So what's it saying there today?
This is the perfect week. Spring finally hit yesterday. The weather has been like awful before that. Right now it's 19 Celsius, and for all of my US folk, 65 Fahrenheit.
Perfect. Yeah. To be fair, like Manchester today, I'm looking out the window here. I can see a blue sky in Manchester, so it's not too bad here, but it's not 19 degrees. Being Irish though, I still need to be careful, otherwise I'll come back looking like a lobster on Monday. But we'll see.
Yep.
I saw just a lot of content you've created at Ad Conversion, really high-end production quality. And we just before we came live on stage here, you were saying that the ad conversion team are remote and they're based in different locations. But when I'm looking at the content, it seems like the content's all shot in the same studio. And is that true, or is it kind of you're using different studios, but you just made them look identical in each case?
So for our courses specifically, and like the content that we film with the instructors, and then like a lot like some of the examples you have today for the ads, we film them in studio. So typically what we do is we fly to the instructor wherever they are in the world, and then we'll rent a local studio, and then we have like a similar aesthetic that we'll make sure that the studio can support. And then that's kind of how you get that same look and feel, but behind the scenes, like for example, like our LinkedIn ads course was shot in London, and our Reddit ads courses were shot in London, but our Google ads courses were shot in Miami. So it's like all these different studios, but like similar aesthetic because of the way we set up the scene.
Yeah, there's a real consistency to it that I noticed, and yeah, really good job on those courses as well. We have had a few more people join the session now, and I have a bit of housekeeping and preamble to get through. So again, welcome everyone. Very glad to have you here, either live or if you're watching back on demand. For those that don't know me, I'm James. I'm the content lead here at Lunio, and I'll be hosting the webinar today. We're aiming for around 50 minutes to get through all the content. There is quite a lot to get through. We'll do our best to get through it, and also leave some time at the end for a Q&A with Silvio, which I'll say more about in just a second. But just a few other quick bits of housekeeping. A lot of people often ask us in the chat, are we recording the session and will it be available to watch back on demand? Yes, we are recording the session. It will be uploaded to Lunio's YouTube channel, and also it will be available on the Lunio website on our blog page. If you have any questions specifically for Silvio, please pop those into the Q&A tab, which you can see next to the chat tab. And that just means that they won't get lost or buried in the chat. And then I can try and get round to as many of those as we can at the end. Also, just to mention, if someone else has asked a question in the Q&A tab and you'd be interested in hearing the answer to that as well, please do upvote your preferred questions or your kind of questions that you're interested in. And that just kind of helps me prioritize which ones to answer first. Another point to mention is we've got quite a lot of resources today in the Docs tab here in Goldcast, and I'm going to be directing your attention there at relevant parts throughout the session so you can get more context and some free resources about some of the content we'll be covering. In the Docs tab, you can also find the link to Silvio's LinkedIn profile, so you can connect with him there if you aren't already to get the latest updates from him. We'll also be running a few audience polls during the session, which if you've been to one of these webinars before, you'll know. But if this is your first time, you can vote on those polls in the polls tab, which isn't open right now. But on that note, I'm just going to open our first poll today, which is about Google's recent change to video action campaigns. So from next week onwards, the option to create new video action campaigns will be removed from Google Ads. And in July this year, existing video action campaigns will be automatically upgraded to Demand Gen. And if you want to know more about that upcoming change, there's a link to a Search Engine Land article in the Docs tab, which covers the key information you should be aware of. But with that said, the first poll's on screen here. The audience reactions are coming in, Silvio. But just to pass over to you to gauge your kind of reaction to this news. And do you think this move from Google stands to advertise Google more or advertisers more? Like, what's your take on it?
The way I kind of summarize this is the PMaxification of YouTube ad campaigns. So generally speaking, I don't think it's in the favor of the advertiser. Generally speaking, if we want to support the advertiser, we should give them more options, not less. That's my point of view. More options around where our inventory gets placed, more options around like the bid strategies that we can use to support our goals, more options around transparency on where our ads are actually seen. So all in all, for everyone too, if you guys aren't too familiar with this, basically demand gen campaigns, where you're serving on the Discover feed, Gmail, YouTube. Now Google is forcing advertisers, if you want to run action campaigns where you're using conversion-based bid strategies with video, you have to do it through demand gen now. You can't just stand up a standalone video campaign like in the past. All in all, like, I have mixed feelings, but I don't think it's the end of the world, because for a lot of our clients specifically, like, and for everyone in the call, like, my world is primarily B2B and software. We're doing a lot of YouTube through manual CPV bidding, so that way we only show up on the YouTube network and not on Discovery and these other places.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, just I was listening to the Solutions 8 podcast about that change as well, and yeah, those guys were pretty frustrated with. They didn't use your term, the PMaxification, but it is a good term to summarize what's going on here. Just Google's attempt to maximize that inventory that they have across some of those other placement types. But yeah, interesting to see that a lot of people, based on the poll responses, already using Demand Gen. And we will be getting into Demand Gen a bit later in the session with some helpful resources there. Also interesting to see that some people weren't aware that this transition was upcoming. But with that said, I'm just going to bring our agenda slide on the screen here. And I've kind of covered the housekeeping. So we've got 10 main points to cover on the agenda today. Firstly, we're going to be getting into the importance of video hooks. And in that section, myself and Silvio are going to dissect 3 real-world examples of strong video hooks that you can learn from both B2C and B2B brands. Next, we'll talk about the tried and tested 5-part video framework that most good ads follow. And after we go through that framework, Silvio is going to talk us through another example ad from GoDaddy, and he'll explain where it falls short and where you can avoid getting caught out by some of the same issues with your own creative. Then we'll look at strategies to keep your video production costs down, including how you can use AI tools in the video creation process while being mindful of the potential pitfalls there. And after that point in the session, we're going to transition from talking about creative to talking about the different channels to distribute and scale your video ads effectively, starting with YouTube first. During that section, I'll be pointing out some helpful resources from Silvio and the team at AdConversion with some interesting benchmark data in relation to average cost and performance of YouTube video ads. After we look at YouTube, then we will move on to look at PMax and Demand Gen. That section will be relatively brief. We could go down a rabbit hole there and spend a full session on that topic. But what we will do is signpost you towards lots of useful guides, resources, and tools for both PMax and Demand Gen for any of you that want to dig deeper into how you can optimize those particular campaign types. After that, we'll move beyond the Google ecosystem to look at LinkedIn, which is one of Silvio's specialist subjects. He and the team at AdConversion have been running some interesting experiments with the new thought leader video ad format on LinkedIn. And Silvio will talk us through some of the results he's achieved there so far, as well as some other tips to keep your cost per lead down on LinkedIn, because it can be notoriously expensive. After that, we'll move on from LinkedIn to look at Meta. Again, in the interest of time, we'll be quickly running through some top tips there to maximize your video ad performance on Meta and also your ad spend efficiency. And then we will wrap things up by looking at the halo effect of video ads on conversions and how you can get a more holistic view of the incremental performance improvements your video campaigns are having. As I mentioned before, after we get through all the content, we will have a Q&A session with Silvio at the end, so you can ask him your own questions. Just please pop those into the Q&A tab if there is something specific that you'd like to ask about any of the content that we covered today. So that's it for the main agenda. So if I just move on to the next slide here, just one sec. So it makes sense to start with hooks. And just for anyone that might not be aware, a video hook is just the initial part of the video designed to immediately grab the viewer's attention and make them want to keep watching. It's a short, impactful element, usually like a question, a bold statement, an enticing visual, something that creates curiosity and compels engagement. And basically, if you get this part wrong, the entire rest of the session today isn't going to be a huge amount of use for you. So in terms of where to invest your energy, time, and focus, it really makes sense to spend a disproportionate amount of time and effort trying to get your hook right. And that's neatly summarized in the post that we can see on the slide here from Arthur Jones. And if you'd like to read that post from Arthur in its entirety, you can find that in the docs tab. But to pass over to you now, Silvio, what are some of the most common mistakes you see when it comes to video hooks?
So the first most common mistake I see is people are not clear and they're not getting to the point fast enough. So the whole purpose of the hook is you want to make it very clear who this is for and who this is not for. So calling out exactly the ICP that this is for, you can do that in different ways. But it should just be really clear, like, what is this ad about fundamentally? And most brands where they struggle with the hook, they tend to ramble on. One of the things that I see all the time with like corporate brands is they use like logo intro animations. They're just wasting all of this time that's so precious to grab the viewer's attention and, have them you win them for that frame and then you want to win them again over the course of the video. So I would say the first one that comes to mind is just wasting time and not getting to the point as fast as humanly possible. So really with the hook, like the analogy here, it's like the old saying, it's like, I think it was David Ogilvy, it's like for every dollar he spends on an ad, 90 cents goes to the headline. In today's day and age, that's the hook. So typically when we're testing video ads, we'll use the same video, but we'll just have like 10 different variations of the video with different hooks. And we'll just stitch it together in editing so that way we can test which variations are driving the best view rates, the best click-through rates, and so on and so forth compared to the other ones.
Yeah, that's a great point. And on some of the other sides, we're going to look at that strategy that you kind of follow and recommend about, refilming the hook multiple times and making sure that you do test different hook variants because it is so impactful. The point and the quote that we've got on the slide here from you, Silvio, some people might be thinking, where am I going to come up with 10 ideas for different hooks? And I think when we spoke about this, it was a couple of years ago now, you just raised a really valid point that all that information is potentially sitting there waiting for you in the testimonials and the things that customers have already said about your brand. So if you need inspiration for hooks, first protocol is to look at your testimonials, look at what your customers are saying, what are the pain points, what are the challenges that you're helping them solve, and what are the things that they're calling out explicitly that they like about your product or service. But Silvio, beyond looking at your testimonials, are there any other places or sources of inspiration that you would look to when trying to come up with ideas for hooks?
Yeah, the one that I've been loving lately, and it's a great use case with AI, is sales call transcripts. So like all of our sales calls are recorded. So we'll take those sales call recordings and then we'll upload them into ChatGPT. And then we'll ask ChatGPT to identify all of the problems, all the pain points. And one of the favorite things that I love to ask is, what are the exact wording and phrases that our prospects use to describe the problems that they're trying to solve? And those specific phrases then can inform your hooks and your ad copy. So then from there, you extract all these insights from your sales call transcripts, and then you can take it a step further, and then you can further prompt and say, okay, based on the top 5 objections, and the phrases that my prospects use, brainstorm 10 hook variations for insert platform, YouTube, Meta, LinkedIn, etc. And then ChatGPT will give you different campaign ideas with hooks based on those specific things, using the verbiage that your prospects are actually using to communicate the pain that they're going through in the sales process.
Nice. Yeah, it's a really solid use case for AI. And that could take an incredibly long time if you didn't have the support of AI there. But to move on, we're just going to look at now some real world examples of hooks, because I think it's often easier to learn by seeing stuff in practice in the real world. So here we've got 3 different examples of ads, and I'm going to play each one of them for you, and then we're going to dissect each one of them briefly afterwards. The ad we're going to start with it's a B2C example from Grind Coffee. Then we'll look at an example from Monday.com, who are SaaS industry giants when it comes to advertising on YouTube. And then lastly, we'll look at the example from Silvio and the team at AdConversion. So first of all, I'm just going to play this example from Grind Coffee, which is 30 seconds long. So I'm just going to let the ad play in its entirety. And then myself and Silvio will return and we will get into some commentary about.
And if you're just joining us, London Cafe Grind makes coffee pods. They're delivered to your door, they're espresso compatible, and they're plastic free.
Grind coffee, made by our baristas in our cafes. And you, in your pajamas. 9 delicious blends of ethically sourced specialty grade coffee in pods made from plants. Get started for $9.95 at grind.co.uk.
So very quickly, I'm just going to run through a few reasons why I chose that particular example. So firstly, I think the fact that they open with the box going through the letterbox is very clever. I think in human psychology, we instinctively, even if you're not consciously aware of it, you kind of want to know what's inside. There's an unknown there, and then there's a subtle sense of satisfaction or resolution when the box is opened up and we know what's inside. I think you can see clear evidence of that aspect of human psychology in those kids' YouTube channels where those kind of surprise eggs are opened up and then there's a toy inside. The most popular one of those channels, I think, is called Ryan's World, which has more than 40 million subscribers, which is insane. But clearly there is something about the unboxing of the unknown that is very compelling to us. And I think Grind Coffee have cleverly tapped into that and provided that resolution by opening up the box within the first 5 seconds, after which they immediately hit you with their unique value proposition, which is a London-based cafe making their own coffee pods delivered to your door, Nespresso machine compatible, and they're plastic free, and they get all that in within the first 9 seconds, which I thought it was a great ad example. But Silvio, is there anything else that you'd mention or highlight about that one?
Yeah, it's so interesting. Everything is subjective to like the user and in relation to the brand. Like I personally have never heard of Grind Coffee, so this is great because I have no like bias or anything in terms of them. My initial thinking in terms of like the structure of the ad is you can see that it follows like a very standard structure. So you have the hook, then you have the solution, and then finally they resolve into the CTA. Some of the things that stood out to me in terms of like opportunities for the ad is the hook itself. I do like that they put it in the in the letter in the mailbox or whatever, and then it came through and then you can see it. But you have to think about where is this ad actually being played. So like if this ad is running on YouTube as a placement, for example, you have the first 5 seconds to really connect to the viewer, set up context on like what is this ad about, going about like my first point when we started the session today, and then set up the solution, right? I don't think unless like you're just like eagerly waiting along that you would make the connection in your mind that this is coffee, and then more importantly, like what's special about this coffee? You know what I mean? That to me still didn't really like ring true. So if I was them personally, and like I was running this as a YouTube ad, instead of opening up with that, I would probably open up with something that the ICP can relate to. So like, what's the story behind it that can connect the narrative, and then what's the messaging that you really want to drive true? So like having a single message that you can drive through your video ad that you can hinge everything upon will make sure that the solution connects better in the prospect's mind. So for context, like later in the ad, there was a guy sitting at home in his pajamas, And they kind of made the connection there of like, oh, you could be at home sitting in your pajamas drinking coffee. I think it would have been a much stronger frame if they would have started with the guy sitting at home in his pajamas and like almost in front, like I would imagine the first frame is like him trying to make coffee for the day, you know what I mean? And he has no pods. Like that would connect better with the viewer. And then everyone has that problem, right? Like I drink coffee, I might not drink grind coffee, but I need coffee and I drink coffee, right? And then that will at least connect with the viewer. You can create a funny experience from it. It'll be more memorable. And then you tee up the solution, right? Like, oh, I don't have coffee today. That's the big problem. And then from there, it's like, well, grind delivers pods straight to your door and it will just set everything up much more nicely in terms of like those sequence of events. And the other thing too that I really liked about the ad is I love the pace. The pace was really good, but because the hook for me personally, like didn't hook me as well, it just felt like chaotic because I wasn't hooked in the beginning and then everything was happening so quickly and I wasn't really following along. So it kind of just lost me. So I think if they can, and this is like where hook testing is so important for all the viewers because like two people can have a completely different experience, you know? And then there's so many variations of hook testing, like depending on the geo that you're targeting, the voice actor that you're using makes a very big difference in terms of like how it influences performance and you know, like auditory receivableness of like the message and all these things. But that's not to go too into this, but that's like my quick analysis of what we just saw.
Thank you very much, Silvio. So the next example we're going to look at is from Monday.com. It's a 40-second ad. Again, I'm just going to let it play rather than cutting it off, but let's just play the example from Monday. This one, I think you'll find is a bit more straightforward in terms of what the hook is here.
You can use Monday.com to boost your team's efficiency. And I'm going to show you how in 40 seconds. First up, let's integrate all the different tools used by your team and sync them in one place. Now you can easily manage your workflows and pretty much anything else. Speaking of workflows, let's speed them up by automating all those manual tasks that you shouldn't be doing yourself. Now you can focus on the work that really matters and do it so efficiently, you'll wonder how you managed without it. See? Wasn't even 40 seconds. You focus on work, we'll do the rest with Monday.com. Start your free trial.
So yeah, solid ad, big brand, big spenders on YouTube. Again, like I said, I think it's kind of obvious and on the nose in terms of what the hook is here. But Silvio, any commentary or things that you point out about that example from Monday?
Yeah, I think they nailed it. So I love the hook. It was super clear. And also what they did was they addressed the hidden elephant, which is time. You know, like one of the things that I learned with AdConversion, like we offer free courses. And when I first started AdConversion, I thought, oh my God, we're creating free courses taught by the best people. I'm not going to have to do very much marketing at all. It's going to just, you know, like I'm going to make a post on LinkedIn. It's going to go viral and like we're going to ride off into the sunset. And I have learned more than anyone that like just because something is free, you don't have to, doesn't mean you don't have to sell it. And I think they did a really good job at like addressing the fact that, you know, this ad is consuming your time, right? So calling out that 40 seconds is really nice. And then I love how they connected it at the end. I think in terms of like areas of opportunities for this ad is social proof. You know, I didn't really hear anything around like who it's benefited, like their stories, you know, so they've made big claims. And I think Monday.com is a big brand. So we already know there's a level of like credibility and bias with them. But if this was like an incumbent competitor, not a Monday.com, and I've never heard of them before, that's where proof would become much more powerful because I don't know who they are and they're just making claims. And, you know, the video itself is nice in terms of like the motion graphics and things like this. And in my world in SaaS, we typically lean on that. But where it can fail is like the motion graphics look beautiful, but the UI sucks. So like, this is where if they could figure out like, what are those core things that stop users from converting and then make sure that they focus the ad around one core problem and then really try to address it, I think it can make it even more powerful. But all in all, I'm being nitpicky here. Like it was a really good ad. And for the hook too, in terms of like what they should test, they did a good job at connecting their brand to the problem. So like you can use Monday.com to insert problem that they overcome in this ad. if they're not as strong of a brand, instead of leading with that, they could lead with the experience and the credibility of a client. Like Sarah solved da 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 using, it's just a change in language and the way you place the sentence of the words, but it can change the experience of the viewer.
Nice. Yeah, that's a really good point. And yeah, I think it was just a really solid example. And that's kind of one of the reasons why I wanted to draw that out. But we are gonna just play one last example from yourself, Silvio, and the courses that you run at AdConversion. So this is just going to play for 9 or 10 seconds because it comes from a longer video, but the hook is still relevant to what we're talking about here today. So I will play that now.
Google Ads is an auction place, or as I like to think about it, a battleground. If your ad doesn't get in front of the right searcher, it's game over. Doesn't matter how great your copy is or your landing page, it's not the right person.
So yeah, I think the thing that really stood out to me, Silvio, about that was just the battleground analogy and the B-roll shot that you used there, which was just not something that I was expecting to see or that you typically see when it comes to B2B marketing. But I was just hoping you could talk us through the process that you went through when creating that hook.
This is definitely the worst ad in the bundle, I would say. So the main thinking behind that hook, and it's funny, we actually tested against this, so I have some context here. But the main idea with that hook is it's an indirect hook. So, like calling out the word Google Ads, the idea is like that keyword would resonate with people who run Google Ads. But it's an indirect hook because I'm not saying like, hey, if you run Google Ads, you should sign up for our course. I'm saying Google Ads is a battleground, right? And it's something relatable. Like for people who are running Google Ads and they're struggling with Google Ads, like I'm sure for all of the people in the chat today, like you guys can resonate. Like Google Ads is a freaking battleground, right? So that's the whole idea with that hook. But that hook failed because we didn't do a good job at like tying it up to the solution. Like if you watch the rest of the ad, and we've tested some other videos where it was as simple as like screen sharing our Google Ads course page and saying like, hey, if you're a Google advertiser and your results are lacking and you're looking for resources, check this out. And it's super clear, it addresses a problem, and then there's instant credibility because I'm screen sharing and you can actually see what it is that you might get access to.
Nice. Yeah, I think that kind of stuff you see it work really well on LinkedIn, whether it's like some kind of free PDF or just showing people exactly what they're going to get like up front is a great way to go about things. Just in the interest of time, we are going to move on. So really appreciate your insight on and commentary on those 3 different examples there, Silvio. And we're going to move on to look at this kind of standard 5-part video framework that most ads tend to follow. So hook, problem, solution, social proof, and call to action. Obviously, as marketers, we all know calls to action are critically important. And if you want some advice on how you can improve them in your video ads, I'd recommend checking out this post from Connor Lewis, which you can see on the slide here, where he talks about the 3 main things that he keeps in mind when crafting CTAs in his video scripts. Link to Connor's LinkedIn post is in the docs tab. But for you now, Silvio, we've kind of spoken a lot about hooks already. And could you briefly outline what is meant by the other 4 parts in this framework and any top level advice that you'd have for those other 4 stages?
Yeah, so for the problem, I mean, it's really as clear as like, what is the big problem? And I think the mistake that I've made in the past and that I see other people make is they try to focus on too many problems in the same ad. You're much better off addressing like the concept of like one big idea, one big message. In this case, it's like, what is the one core problem and the one big takeaway you want them to take away from the ad and watching it? Because typically you don't have a lot of time, right? Especially if this ad is going to prospects that are, more top of funnel, they're cold, like they're not going to give you the benefit of the doubt. And you really want to make sure you create the association of their mind of like, this problem, we have this solution, and tying your brand as like the bow. So oftentimes what you can do is, I know this is like listed out as like a step-by-step, and I think frameworks are helpful to conceptualize things, but once you understand the framework, you can kind of start to break it a little bit. For context, like it doesn't have to be a hook and then a problem. The hook can also incorporate the problem. So you kind of do 1 and 2 together within the same step, and then you transition into the solution. For the solution, having step by step, like making it very clear, like here's how we solve this in 3 steps. Like using numbers to anchor people works really well so that they can follow along. It also really helps from the editing perspective, because now your editors can reinforce where you are in terms of those solutions, in terms of like how they actually set up the video. And then for the social proof side of things, the way I really like to think about this is, like, if I would rename that, I would consider it like doubts. So like, what are the doubts that you're trying to solve and the credibility that you're trying to gain from the social proof that you're actually using? So when you think about it from that perspective, now you can become a little bit more strategic with the social proof that you're actually running. So for context, like with us at AdConversion, our courses are free, and like people do not believe us. They're like, it is literally too good to be true. So like when I'm using social proof, I'm like, hey, and if you think this is too good to be true, just check out all of these testimonials. And then we'll just like flood the page with like, I can't believe the course is free. I can't believe the course is free. Like now we're getting strategic with our social proof, which is answering these big objections. And we're trying to boost that credibility to help kind of improve the perceived value in the prospect's mind. And then finally, the call to action is pretty straightforward. But sometimes what I like to do is I like to embed CTAs in the middle of the script. So there'll be like an early CTA and then of course the final CTA, just to kind of already bridge what you want them to do. And then the other thing too is you can reinforce the CTA through editing. So like you can add motion graphics on screen, like arrows pointing at your CTA buttons, saying click now to learn more, things like this to kind of help drive a higher click-through rate really helps. And then finally, the one thing that I think all the ads could have improved on is in the CTA, and this is very much a YouTube specific thing, is you want to make sure you give the viewer enough time to click at the end of the video. So like the outro itself, you usually want to like just make it last for at least 5 to 10 seconds. So the viewer actually has time to click and take action. I've seen some really great ads in the past from like the Harmon brothers, where like they'll use the outro section and they'll like walk back in frame and they're like, hey, you're still here? You haven't clicked the ad? What are you waiting for? You know, so that's like another cool way to leverage that section.
Yeah, that's a great point. And yeah, like, when you mentioned that, the thing that came to mind is some podcasters and some of the tactics that they use. If you watch a clip of their podcast, to then try and get you to click on to watch the full video, and you using that outro CTA effectively. But next, we will go on to another ad example. So this is the kind of last ad example that we'll play during the session today. But Silvio, you actually created a really good LinkedIn post breaking down this example from GoDaddy, another big brand that kind of everyone is probably already aware of. And you kind of pointed out some areas where this ad fell short and where it might be improved. So just so everyone knows, I'm going to play the ad. It's 30 seconds long, and then we will return and Silvio will kind of break down what the key takeaways are from this. So here's the ad from GoDaddy.
Have you got big plans for your small business? Get a hosting plan that can fit your unique, ambitious, and ever-changing business needs. Get a hosting plan that can grow with your business success. Choose GoDaddy as your trusted web host. Start for free at godaddy.com.
So Silvio, over to you on that one.
Like if I had to grade this, you know, like A, B, C, D, E, F, you know, like grade school, this is an F. This is definitely what you do not want to do when you run ads. Like 100%, this is like ChatGPT-esque, you know. Unfortunately, like this is what most small businesses think they should be doing, because they look at brands like GoDaddy and all these companies, and then they replicate the same thing. So I've got my notes in front of me here from the post. So the first key thing is the hook. So, you know, like any great advertiser will tell you, the most important part of your video is the hook, like we talked about today. And you really want to just get to the point as fast as possible. Like I cannot stress this enough. Like, you know, nobody, like at the end of the day, your ads are an interruption, you know, like, unless it's Google search, somebody's searching something and then they're choosing to click on your ads. For the most part, like your ads are you know, you're not a guest, you are a pest. So you want to get to the point as fast as possible. And like in this case, they have the logo intro animation, which is absolutely terrible. It's not until like second 4 when they actually mention the hook. And the hook that they had was, do you have big plans for your small business? Like, it is much better to be clear than to be clever. That is like one truism that I always see to be true when I run tests. So like, it's too vague. You know what I mean? Like, do you have big plans for your small business? You know, like that can go so many different directions. It's better to be much more specific. So what I would do if I was GoDaddy is I would review my customer testimonials, and I would really think about like, what are the transformations that they have made for small businesses, and what do they care about? Because like in the case of GoDaddy, like they've done such great work. They've been around for so long. Like, I'm sure they have so much gold in those testimonials if they actually went through it. So really asking yourself, like, again, what's the transformation that people are trying to solve? Like, what are the jobs to be done? So I would ask questions like, what is the real value of a website? You know, like, no one starts a business and then they're excited to buy a hosting plan and build a website. Like, and that's like from my personal experience. I remember my first website I had to build on my own was awful. And it was like such a pain in the butt to do it. So really like taking a step back. So it's like, okay, hosting, what is that? It's technical, it's boring, it's complicated. Website, it's difficult, it's overwhelming, it's expensive. And when you kind of go through this process, like really categorizing things into words is helpful to kind of really pull this out. So then from there, if we kind of be like, okay, hosting is technical, boring, complicated, websites are difficult, overwhelming, and expensive. If you combine it though, that's where the real value is. So the experience, the transformation that somebody can have from combining these things are, they can have a place where your brand can be found online. That's valuable. They can communicate their message and create an experience for users. And they can allow themselves to have a digital piece of real estate where they can make all of their efforts revolve around. So like, if I put all this stuff together, the new hook that I would suggest to GoDaddy would be, building your website is the first most important decision you have to make as a small business owner. But it can be difficult, expensive, and overwhelming. That speaks much more specifically to a very specific transformation that they provide and a problem that they solve, and will much more easily like set up the solution for them, right? So we would definitely get rid of the logo and animation, and we would just say that at the beginning as an example, and that would be one hook. And that's much better, in my opinion, than like, do you have big plans for your small business? The second one on the solution, so like once they bridge into the solution, when they finally do make the bridge, they put get a hosting business plan that can fit your unique, ambitious, and ever-changing business needs. Like, no one speaks that way, right? So you want to speak in the language of your customer. And the most important thing at making video ads work is the script. Like, this is like a hill that I will die on. I can take a great script and I can film it using literally my iPhone and it'll crush. I can take that same script and I can film it in a studio with a production team and it'll crush. I can take that same script and I can feed it to AI and it'll crush. The script is the one thing, it's like the lifeblood that the whole ad revolves around. It's the same thing with movies. It's like, you can have the best set, you know what I mean? The best actors, but if the script writing is terrible, like, no one's gonna like the movies. Like, they might sign up because they like the actors, but it's definitely not going to become like a bestseller and something that, you know, people keep watching again and again in the future. So for the solution for them, you know, like word for word, like remember to use the languages like I talked about earlier. What are the phrases that your customers use? Like the voiceover for this video itself, like I would customize the voiceover based on the demographics of like where they're targeting based on the geos in the world. And what are the accents being used in those geos so that it can relate more? You know, like for context with GoDaddy, I'm sure there's a play that they can make based on like age ranges, you know, like small business owners that are in their 40s versus small business owners that are in their 20s and 30s. And then they can have an actor that speaks in their voice, simple language, things like this would land a lot better. And then just to kind of close out here, like on the CTA side of things is, they're really trying really hard to like cram their video to be in a 30-second slot. And in their case, like there's so much B-roll and there's no narration. There's like 5 seconds of B-roll towards the end of that ad where it's literally just like screenshots of like a cup and like some lady with flowers or something like that. You know, like there's no narration, there's no B-roll. So it's like, what's going on here? You know what I mean? So never assume people will make the connection. Like use narration and visuals together, so that way it's very clear what is going on. And yeah, I guess I'll stop there. I feel like I roasted a bit, but a lot of room for opportunity on this ad.
Yeah. Just shout out to Peter in the comment section saying it sounds like pure ChatGPT. And yeah, I think it was that solution line about that unique, ambitious, and ever-changing business needs. It just makes me cringe as a copywriter. And like you said, Silvio, if you would not say this out loud in a real conversation with another human being, do not put it into your video script. Like, it just doesn't make sense. So Silvio, we got 20 minutes left here to try and speed run through the rest of the content that we've got. Sure. I think we're gonna cap it at 3 o'clock, and then we're gonna run over for 10 minutes to take some Q&A at the end. So we'll progress through these slides that we've got. Obviously, we're going to talk now about keeping production costs down. And one of the main pain points about video is how expensive it can be. Especially with professional quality production. Obviously working with UGC is a bit different, but in this context we're talking about higher end video production. As you can see here on the slide, Silvio has mentioned this strategy before about refilming the hook multiple times and then keeping the rest of the video the same. That in itself helps to keep your video production costs down. One other thing is never outsource your script. As we've been talking about, ultimately, if it's your business or you're dealing with these customers and you understand their pain points better than anyone else, you should channel that knowledge into your video script. And as Silvio was saying, that is the lifeblood of what makes a video work. Unlike your script, you very much can outsource the actual production to bring that script and concept to life. And you should be able to find a decent quality producer, a videographer, or someone who creates ads to turn that around for you for a reasonable price. $1,000 to $2,000 isn't out of the question. Just on that point, Silvio, is there any advice you give to when it comes to vetting freelance video producers and working with them more effectively?
Yeah, I think the first thing is video is expensive. It can be as expensive as you want it to be. And I think one of the things that I realized with AdConversion, like, because we do, productions in studio and things like this, is you could do high-end production without breaking the bank, So there's like a couple of key things that you can have, like you could just get a good DSLR, good lighting, a good backdrop, and you can already have like a pretty good looking ad in terms of like production quality. And it doesn't need to take, hundreds of thousands of dollars. I think a lot of people, when they associate production, they think of, like these mega brands that are creating stories, they're casting actors, they are, really creating like a sequence of campaigns. It doesn't need to be that way. When you're thinking about like performance marketing and you're running video for performance marketing, it's much more about trying to be effective around what converts and doing it with the greatest return on effort. So just for everyone listening, like if you did want to do some more high-end production stuff, it's very doable. Like for context in terms of like prices, you could rent a studio for 3 days, like full 3 days of 8 hours per day. Depending on the location, it can be as low as like $1,000 total. You can also, once you figure out like good studios, you can get relationships with the studio owners, and then they can give you discounts as well in the future. And if you book more time slots with studio owners, they'll also give you like more discounts on how much they charge in the hourly rate. So for those that have considered this stuff, like know that it is accessible. I honestly think it's one of the biggest like hacks that most brands don't take advantage of, is just getting their content team in a studio. Like we film over 70 videos in the span of 2 days in studio. Like for us to do that on our own is bananas, right? So like the ROI and the ROE is insane when you do film in studio. With that being said, in terms of like video editors and pricing, you can find great video editors on platforms like Upwork. In terms of like hourly rates, I've seen them range as low as $15 an hour to as high as $80 an hour. The sweet spot that I've kind of landed on is around 25. You can find pretty good people at $25 an hour. And then in terms of vetting them, I would always ask for like work references, so like a portfolio. And then I always do like sample projects with editors. So, you know, like we'll ask them to edit a video, turn it into an ad or something like this. You can pay them for it and just get like some actual demonstratable work based on like your environment. And then also when you're working with editors, like see how communicative they are in terms of like proactiveness and like, are they bringing new suggestions to the table? These are the things that we're kind of considering of. And if you can find somebody that has the right stuff, they might not know video ads per se, you can teach them that in terms of like the principles, and then they can adopt it once you give them that. But really finding the right person who's proactive, they think outside the box, and then they're willing to dive in, I think is the most important thing.
Nice. Thanks for that, Silvio. Really interesting points there. And obviously in 2025, we'd be missing something if we didn't touch on AI. So there are obviously lots of ways AI can help with video creation. We've obviously touched on some of the dangers of letting ChatGPT go too wild with your script. But it is one of the most obvious ways that you can incorporate AI into the video creation process. And it can definitely speed up the drafting process, but it is essential that the human input is going into that editing process. And just in general, that you are, you know, revising and editing more than once, ideally, getting different eyes on it, getting different perspectives on it. If you're going to be spending money turning this script into a fully finished video, you should spend quite a bit of time editing your script and getting that as polished and refined as you can. If you are interested in seeing some examples of prompts and a suggested workflow that you can use to get ChatGPT to draft your video scripts, you can check out the article from Bob and Miles over at PPC Mastery, which is linked in the docs tab. The second thing I'm just going to briefly discuss is the rise of these kind of generative AI tools for making ads, such as Icon. I've seen a few of these popping up on LinkedIn. Icon seems to be one of the leaders in this emerging market for now. As far as I can see, it is a paid tool. You can find a link to it in the docs tab. I am going to give a disclaimer that I haven't actually used this tool. I cannot vouch for the quality of the outputs it generates. It seems to specialize in UGC type video outputs. But to pass over to you, Silvio, just to briefly get your take on using AI to help with video scripts, and if you have any thoughts on these kind of AI video creation tools.
Yeah, definitely like a land of opportunity. Something that we haven't gone too deep on. The tool that we do find ourselves using is Riverside, and Riverside has this feature called Magic Clips that we find really helpful. And then with Riverside, it's really easy on the editing side to like remove pauses, improve like the speed of the video, add captions, add text on screen, things like this. So that's a tool that we really enjoy, and like those capabilities have made our internal growth team more self-sufficient, where now they don't have to rely on video editor resources, because in our case, like our video editors are always slammed creating video ads and then editing courses. So like Riverside has been great for us to like have the growth team be able to, you know, support themselves on the video side. Outside of that, I've never used Icon. I'm definitely going to check it out after you share this with me. All in all, I think there's a place for this, and I think the tech is just going to keep getting better and better. All in all, it's an accelerant, right? So it's like what you feed it, it will output. So I think people should definitely research AI tools, but they shouldn't make the mistake of thinking AI will solve their problems. You still need to nail the fundamentals. Like you need to understand who's your target audience. You need to understand your script and the message that you want to convey to them, the problem you're trying to solve, and how you're going to bridge your solution. And then you can use AI in fun ways to give you access to B-roll that would be hard to record and film yourself. That's a really good use case of AI in video. So for context, like if I wanted to generate a piece of imagery around like, you know, the drone shots over, you know, Budapest or something, like I could easily do that using AI, compared to like I have to actually fly out to Budapest, take drone shots, and so on and so forth. And the cool thing too with using AI for B-roll is B-roll is typically very quick, right? So it doesn't give the viewer enough time. It's not like they're watching a whole AI generated ad that you can tell it's AI. You're just using B-roll generated AI very strategically to add variety to the video, and like every 2 to 3 seconds, you're trying to drive cuts, right? So you can move on to the next frame.
Nice. Thank you for that, Silvio. And again, I'm sorry if it seems like we're rushing through this. It's just there's a few slides. I just want to touch on as many of them as we can. So obviously we've spoken about YouTube already. Two useful resources I just want to mention upfront from the team at AdConversion, both of which you can find in the Docs tab. The first, which you can see on the screen here, is just a blog post or a collection of YouTube performance benchmark data based on campaigns that the AdConversion team have run. And that's where this chart that you can see on the slide comes from, where it states that the average cost per view for an in-stream YouTube ad is around 5 cents, ranging up to 19 cents on the higher end. And the second is a video from Silvio, which highlights 4 different retargeting audiences that are worth experimenting with on YouTube, including audiences from LinkedIn, Meta, and Twitter. We don't have enough time today to do a deep dive on YouTube retargeting, but if you are already spending money on that, I definitely recommend checking out that video from Silvio. Silvio, we've spoken about YouTube a lot, but just before we kind of move on, is there any other top level advices or tips that you give to people on YouTube?
I think the biggest thing that people don't realize, which is mind boggling because it's been around for like 5 years now, 4 years, is you can target people who are searching on Google, searching keywords, and you can target those same people on YouTube ads using custom intent audiences. So if somebody, for example, like I work in the SaaS arena, so it's super expensive, competitive. If I was promoting someone like Monday.com, CRM software might cost $80 a click. Want to be really strategic about how we approach that. I could reach the same people who are searching CRM software with YouTube using these custom audiences. So for those of you that are not using YouTube, it's definitely a big opportunity. And then the last thing I will mention that I see like dissuades people from leveraging YouTube is placements. So when you run YouTube ads, you have to remember the type of targeting you're using. So if you're using something like in-market, custom audiences, you're targeting people based on their past behavior, not what they're currently watching. And I would advise for everyone, like when you're watching YouTube videos and you see a relevant ad, take a quick look at the video you're watching right now. It's probably not related to the ad, but they're probably targeting you based on your past activities. So that's just a big thing I want to call out, because unless you're using contextual targeting, I wouldn't stress the placements that much outside of like a brand safety perspective.
Nice. And then just another quick point. We were going to spend a bit more time on this, but just very quickly, this was my favorite slide from the whole deck because we managed to work in Bobby from King of the Hill, and he's a legend. But Bobby aside, make sure that you are frequency capping your YouTube ads and make sure that you're not over serving them and wasting money in the process. There is more that we could say about that, but in the interest of time, I'm just going to move on to the other parts. As I mentioned at the beginning, we don't have a huge amount of time, and there's so much that we could say about Google Demand Gen and PMax campaigns. But because video is an important aspect of both of those campaigns, I felt the session wouldn't be complete today if we didn't at least touch on them in passing. But for those of you who do want to dig deeper over the next couple of slides, I'm just going to run through some helpful resources and tools that you can use to optimize performance across these campaign types. Again, all those resources are in the Docs tab. But Silvio, I know we were kind of going back and forth on LinkedIn in preparation for this webinar. And what are the key things that you would want people to take away when it comes to video assets within PMax and Demand Gen campaigns?
The big thing I'll mention, just to be mindful of time, is when you're putting together your videos, put it together with YouTube in mind. Because when you look at where your actual video content is being displayed, YouTube is the biggest part of it. So the videos you leverage for Demand Gen, for PMax, like I would upload those videos with YouTube best practices in mind.
Nice. And just very quickly, Silvio, could you just tell us why you're not a fan of PMax for B2B and the things you've seen there?
Just based on the data that we've gotten in terms of the results, we always see a ton of conversions come from PMax whenever we run tests for our clients. But then we look in their CRM and it's all just like phantom conversions, or it's like bots. There's like a ton of bots that come through. So we never see it work out, because for us, like we always measure based on later stage pipeline. So like, MQLs, opportunities, etc. So when we actually look at the data based on later stage pipeline, PMax never performs well, at least so far for us. So generally speaking, we focus on search, and then we'll run like a more traditional strategy there. And then we'll focus on YouTube separately versus just kind of putting it all together with PMax.
Nice. And just on the demand gen resources, so very, very quickly, we've got 3 different resources here from Lunio. If you do want to dig a bit deeper on demand gen, the first is the blog post that you can see on screen here, detailing useful specifications, examples, and tips. It's one of our top performing posts in terms of organic traffic. So if you need a basic overview, that's a great place to start. Next, we got the webinar we hosted with Thomas Etchell, aka the Demand Gen Whisperer, last year, all about demand gen campaigns, where we go a bit more in depth on the topic. You can find that on Lunio's YouTube channel. The session's fully timestamped, so you can skip ahead to the sections and topics that interest you most. And then lastly, we've got this podcast episode that we recorded with Thomas as well. You don't even need to go to the docs tab for that one. You can just scan the QR code on your phone now and go there directly. And in that episode, Thomas outlines a very clever strategy that he designed for using meta campaigns to seed your lookalike audiences for demand gen and then accelerate performance of demand gen in that process. If you do end up checking out that episode with Thomas and you find it useful, don't forget to subscribe to the Lunio YouTube channel to get all the latest episodes of the Paid Media Lab podcast. Season 1 has wrapped up now, but we will be back in May with season 2, so stay tuned for that. Lastly, there is a link in the docs tab to the paid resource, which is Thomas Etchell's demand gen playbook, where he's kind of synthesized and brought together all the learnings and insights that he's learned about demand gen so far. I think it does cost about €50, but if you're really invested in demand gen and spending a lot of money on it, you will definitely get your return on investment if you purchase that playbook from Thomas. Link to that is in the docs tab. Again, just 2 PMax resources. So you might have seen it already. At Lunio, we've got a PMax junk placement exclusion list, and it stops your ads showing up on low quality websites like the ones highlighted in the post from here tier. You can download that for free. The second is the Ngram keyword analysis tool from Optio, which is actually integrated directly into the Lunio product as well. And with the recent announcement from Google that they are upping the cap on PMax negatives to 10,000 per campaign, this tool just got 100 times more useful. Basically, you can use it to identify and exclude low-performing keywords that your PMax campaigns have served on. That is a paid tool, but you can learn more about that via the link in the docs tab. And I'll just point out that recent data from Optio showed that more than 68% of PMax campaigns are running without a single negative keyword in place. So if you fall into that bucket, I highly recommend changing that and adding as many negatives as you can to those PMax campaigns. Otherwise, you're literally handing Google money for very little in return. Lastly, and as Silvio just mentioned, PMax does have a lot more bot traffic. From the data we've collected at Lunio, PMax's average IBT rate is 1.24% higher than Google search and shopping. It forces the use of display ads. It does generate a lot more bad clicks and just kind of junk conversions. And there is variability in the IVT rate that we see for PMax campaigns. So on the low end, that can be 1.5%. And on the high end, we see some PMax campaigns with IVT rates of 18% or more. And the reality is there's no way to know exactly where your own campaigns fall within that range without auditing your traffic. So if you are interested to find out how much IVT your PMax campaigns are currently bringing in, you can request a 2-week traffic audit from Lunio, where we will monitor and analyze all the clicks coming from your Google Ads account. And at the end, you'll find out exactly where you fall within that range from 1.5 to 18%, as well as how your PMax campaigns compare to YouTube and search campaigns. There is a link in the docs tab if you would like to speak to us about auditing your traffic for bots and invalid clicks. LinkedIn, I know, Silvio, you could spend a long time talking about LinkedIn, but I do want to just give you the chance to talk through the results of the experiments that you did with the thought leader ad format on LinkedIn.
Yeah, so super quick, LinkedIn thought leader ads is basically where you take a standard organic post from an individual and then you can boost it with ads. So essentially we tested a company page promoting a video compared to an individual. In this case, it was me with a video, and we wanted to see what's the effect in terms of the thought leader post using the same video versus the company page. And the results were with the thought leader post, we saw a 49% higher view rate We also saw the cost per landing page click was 75% lower, and the engagement rate was 27% higher. And because we had such a good engagement, the CPM was also 42% lower. So we just saw thought leader ads outperform standard company page ads across the board. So it's definitely the best ad format, I would say, in terms of LinkedIn today to really leverage in terms of your prospecting strategy.
Nice. And then again, Silvio, another post from here that I just thought I wanted to flag. So I think this post was made by you 7 months ago, and it was you were at the time branching out and running ads on Meta for ad conversion. So is there anything you'd share with the audience just before we kind of finish up today about the results of the experimentation you've been doing on Meta so far?
Yeah, we didn't actually get to go in detail in terms of this test, in terms of like testing it over the last 7 months. But the big takeaways that we got early on was you want to make sure that you are selecting placements. I know there's like mixed feelings around this in terms of like fully leaning into like algorithmic bidding and Meta, which yes, for sure makes sense. But when you're first starting out and you don't really have any success or validity, we really found a huge difference on the performance of the ad depending on the placement. And if you're just opting into automatic placements, Facebook Meta will like start to serve your ad in like their video feed and like all these other like, you know, less quality placements. And then also there's this setting when you upload ads into Meta where they'll like cut and trim your ad and they'll like basically distort the original version. So make sure you turn that off. And then what we recommend that you do is you really just optimize for feeds and stories and reels, depending on the video format you have available. So you have to respect the platform, meaning I cannot stick my 16:9 video in a in a story. It's just going to look terrible. So really, I think that's the biggest takeaway for Meta is like you have to create different videos for different types of inventory. So stories should be 9:16. In feed ads could be square or 16:9, and then the same thing for reels. That way you can really make sure that they render properly and it's going to be a good UX for the user.
Nice. And then very quickly, just before we get on to the Q&A, I like this slide. I like the graphic on it. You can almost kind of understand what this concept is just by looking at the slide here. But Silvio, could you just kind of close us out here by talking about what the halo effect of video ads is, why it matters, and how people can assess and measure that?
So basically the halo effect is that as you start to run more video ads and you start to really ultimately build more brand awareness and recall, that it's kind of like a rising tide starts to lift all ships. So now you'll start to see more direct traffic, more organic searches for your brand, more people referencing you. So essentially, assuming we're talking like average click-through rates, if it's LinkedIn, the average click-through rate of a good LinkedIn ad is above 1%, which sounds crazy. If we're talking YouTube, a good average click-through rate is like 2 to 3%. If we're talking Meta, a good average click-through rate is like ideally hitting a link click-through rate of like over 1%. So it varies by platform, but the big takeaway is even if we're talking 3-5%, that means 95% of the people are never clicking your ad in the first place. And the great thing about video is there's nothing quite like video to build brand affinity and trust and to create a memorable experience and connection for the user. So when you start to run these ad campaigns and you run video and you really start to scale it, you'll start to notice direct traffic, organic traffic goes up. So it's really important when you're measuring the success of your video efforts that you take into account your baseline in terms of what was your average direct traffic before running these pilots, what was your average traffic in terms of your branded search volume. You can look that up really easily in Google Trends and start to get a baseline of what that looks like. So then after you start to run these ads, what is the impact on that? In addition to that, you can also set up view-through conversions in most platforms. So now you can also start to see what are the platforms saying that people did when they saw the ad and then they later converted on your site.
Nice. Thank you so much, Silvio. And I appreciate you kind of running through that very quickly there. We are going to leave a few minutes now for a Q&A session at the end. That's it for the content. So we have got a few questions that I can see, and we'll try and get through as many of those as we can. I'm just going to open them here and sort them. So I'm going to start just with the questions with the most upvotes. So we have the question here from Tanner, and is there a difference between visual hooks versus audio hooks based on the platform? Say like Meta, Shorts, or Reels, where the volume isn't on. I know captions can solve this, but is a visual hook necessary? Silvio, what's your take on that one?
The way I think about it is you want to stack the deck in your favor as much as possible. So if you can optimize for having a really good visual hook and audio hook, why not? It just increases your chances of success. But for platforms where sound is off by a default, like LinkedIn is also another example where sound isn't on, captions become more important. And then not only that, the visual hook as well, because if you can capture them visually, because I don't know about you, but like for me, when I'm scrolling through LinkedIn, I see videos pop up, and then I'll look at the video first, try to get a sense of what's going on. And this all happens like within a fraction of a second. So if the visual hook is strong, and then I actually turn on sound and the audio hook is reinforcing it, then it makes everything better. So I would optimize for both. Ultimately, I think what really matters more is the script solid? Is the hook itself solid? Because if you have that down, you can get away with a lot of the lack of the other things.
Nice. Yeah, the point you made about, you can take the same script and you can record it on your iPhone or in a high-end production, like there's no getting away from that. So yeah, solid point there. And we've got the next question here from Chris. So thoughts on using meta ads for B2B versus LinkedIn? What would be your thoughts on that one?
I would definitely start with LinkedIn first if you're B2B, just because you can almost guarantee you're going to get in front of the right people. Also, when you're in B2B, we don't just care about getting in front of the right person. We also care about getting in front of the right company. And LinkedIn lets you do that really easily with company list targeting. So I would start there just to really get validity and prove traction with your audience. I would then add meta into the mix as like a way to scale further and start to create more omnipresence with your audience outside of just the LinkedIn feeds. Absolutely, Meta is a very strong platform for B2B if you can nail the targeting. But if you can't get LinkedIn to work, Meta won't save you. It's like if you're getting in front of the right people and they're not responding in the way that you want them to, then it's either an issue with your offer doesn't match with where they are in terms of their buyer's journey and their funnel stage. Maybe you're asking too much. Classic example of this in B2B is asking people for a demo when they've never heard of you before, Maybe you want to optimize that offer so you can get a better response. In addition to that, assuming the offer is okay, you've got conversions coming in, but your conversion rate isn't high enough, then it could be the ad. Like, what does the click-through rate look like? What does the view rate look like? And you can kind of think about it like a funnel, and see where is the drop off, and then optimize accordingly. But definitely use Meta for sure. It's worth it. You just want to make sure if you're using Meta, you're using custom lists, so you're uploading first-party data into the platform, so you can really get in front of the right people. Or you're using third-party tools to leverage their tech to be able to get some LinkedIn-like targeting on Meta.
Nice. So the next question, I think you kind of already touched on it on one of your last points there, but does bespoke video content need to be created for each channel, TikTok versus Meta versus YouTube? I guess, Silvio, I know you've touched on Meta specifically. You kind of need to make sure that you're creating the video in formats that's going to work there. Is there any areas maybe of crossover where you can kind of repurpose across multiple channels?
Yeah, absolutely. So by the way, like ads, just taking a step back, like ads is just guaranteed distribution, So typically what the best people are doing organically, the same best practices, the same rules apply. You're still operating in the same environment, right? So, but you should 100% respect the truisms and the realities of said platforms. Like I almost think about it as like countries, like each platform is its own country with its own customs. Like, and if I go into that country and I don't respect their customs, obviously like it's not going to be as good of a pleasant experience. So what this looks like in practice is you want to have one session, one film day where you film the content. What I would recommend if you really want to optimize and make like the post-production process much easier is you have one camera that's filming you in like 16:9, and then you have another one that's mounted on a vertical mount that's getting you at 9:16, and you have the two cameras rolling at the same time, and then you film the content. That'll make posts much easier. If that's like a luxury, if you just have the one camera that's 16:9, just put it further away from you so there's more room from the top and the bottom. That'll give your video editors more space, so then post-production, they can cut it where now it's vertical and it doesn't look as bad, because if you're too close up, then it's like, you know, when you have like the videos, it's like, you know, you can see my nose hairs, you know what I mean? So basically what you want to do is you want to take that raw video file, and then you want to create different versions for those different platforms, respecting their truisms. What you don't want to do is you want to create one edit, let's say for YouTube or Meta, and then you take the edited versions that already has the motion graphics, the you know, the captions, etc., and then you try to chop it vertically and stick it on TikTok. You would have much more success if you did the latter versus or the former versus the latter. And that's also what the best content creators do too.
Nice. So Silvio, we just got time for one more question here. So we've got this question from Peter here. Any tips for scaling video ads in low volume niche markets where custom audiences are small?
I think the issue isn't video ads, because the video ad is just an ad format that will be placed on a certain inventory. The real problem you have to solve for is your audience size, right? So what I would do is, if you're in a niche market, I would think about how can I expand my list, you know, without losing like quality. So like, this is something I deal with all the time in the B2B world, is we only have a certain amount of companies. So if there's no way to expand the list size, like, you know, let's say you've got 500 companies and that's it, right? That's your world. That's all that matters. Then you kind of have to accept like that's the constraint you've been given. And then on that channel, the way you're going to scale video ads is by scaling frequency of variations. So like, you want to make sure you're refreshing ads frequently so you can buy up more and more inventory slots. And then depending on the platform, what you want to do is you want to scale horizontally. So you can't change the audience component. So now you want to see, can I reach the same audience across multiple inventory placements? So for example, if we're talking Meta, can I reach the same audience on Reels, on Stories, in Feed, etc.? And now getting in front of the same audience across multiple variations, and that'll be a way for you to scale. The same is true on other platforms. So if you can't change that variable around the audience size, then see if you can hit them with different placements. And then like a nerdy pro tip here is also test different campaign objectives, because maybe you can get some cost breaks as well, where now your CPMs are lower. And now this is where like a vanity metric like CPM matters, because now you can drive a much greater distribution of impressions and rack up that frequency for a lower cost.
Nice. Yeah, thank you so much for Silvio. There, even just in the answers that you gave to those questions, there was so much detail and stuff for people to take away from it. I really appreciate you joining us today, Silvio. It was brilliant to connect with you again. Is there anywhere, before we wrap up, is there anywhere you'd like to point people towards before we finish the session today?
Yeah, for everyone listening, if you guys are interested in leveling up your B2B advertising game and you want access to free courses and not, you know, have to take out a mortgage in the process and get ripped off, check us out at adconversion.com. 5,000 plus B2B marketers take our courses. We've got courses on LinkedIn, Google. We've got a new course on Reddit launching next month. And yeah, all of our courses are free. Like, we wanted to create a place where people can actually learn ads from start to finish. And then for those of you that want to go deeper, definitely check out our community. And if you guys want more content like this, check me out on LinkedIn.
Nice. Thank you, Silvio. Likewise, if you have any questions for us, you can contact us directly via hello@lunio.ai, and we'll be happy to help you there. As I mentioned before, you can get a free traffic audit with Lunio by going to the link in the docs tab. And as Ben mentioned in the chat, Ben works with me on the content team here at Lunio. He will be taking all the insights and all the resources and everything that we discussed today and turning it into a written summary, which will be available on the Lunio website next week, which is usually a super helpful resource if you want a recap of the session, or if you just want to check out some of the resources and things that we mentioned. So shout out to Ben, who will be taking this session, creating the transcript, and creating a great piece of written content off the back of that. Lastly, big thanks to everyone tuning in, either here live or watching back on demand. I hope to see you again at our next webinar, which will be in May. So be on the lookout for the invites for that. But for now, take care, everyone, and all the best with your video campaigns.